Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight, we're diving into three stories that share one terrifying idea: when someone looks human, but isn't. Huge thanks to the authors for letting us experience their pieces. Now, get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let's get into some terrifying Reddit horror stories. My brother Kevin, not his real name, I am trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seen down lately, and maybe being out in the world could help me get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout turned Eagle Scout turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was the way that Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia, where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking him if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to Trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense, and it wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and for what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities. We gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they put a notice out to the Ridge Runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kevin was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through, just a photo of sunset and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of communication with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption like, "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we had called the police was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheeks and jaw. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shorts looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he had smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy, as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom?" That was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower. But something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with a ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breathe. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he had consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, try to get him to say anything at all, really, but all I got were grunts and uh-huhs before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more of the same. Kev eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then it was stilted, awkward, unnatural. He's been home for almost a month now, and something isn't right. His voice, it changed somehow. It's still his voice, but it's like there is a second voice buried underneath it, like someone is trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all of this, maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks, but after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away. And honestly, it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint, I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He widened his stance and dashed his head towards the ground and out of my line of sight. I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure, so I ran out to check on him, and that when I saw it. His head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for at least a day or so, its body bloated and its eyes were dull and hazy. Kevin reached inside the cat's body and started to strip off pieces of muscle and tendon, slurping them up the same way he had been eating our mother's cooking. Pressing his thumb into the thing's skull, he popped out one of its eyes and tossed it back like a grape. I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals. Rabbits, mice, squirrels. I tried to run to my parents' room to wake them up, to tell them that we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood. He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw, and my dad rushed outside to try and, well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police, and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong, though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him, and I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was, killed my brother, and somehow his body came back home. My brother disappeared, but I am terrified he will come back. Tiny, muffled steps hurried down the hall to our bedroom. They stopped just outside our door as a small hand slowly pushed open the old moaning door. There were more footsteps, then a small hop up onto the foot of the bed, and a clumsy crawl up to right between my wife and I. My daughter, 4, often awakened in the middle of the night to come seeking the safety only a parent's bed can provide. Having recently moved in, my wife and I had been lenient on allowing her to come and sleep with us. New houses come with new sounds to get used to, new shadows to puzzle out in the dark, and though this house was new to us, it was actually quite old. There was no shortage of creaks and groans pervading the century-old floorboards and walls. We understood the transition would take some time and she may feel uncomfortable for a while, but it wasn't a habit we wanted to encourage forever. Eventually, we would resume the ritual of returning her to her bed at whatever ungodly hour she had come in. Not tonight, though. Exhausted from a long day of wrangling in our new yard that the old owner had let go feral, I laid facing the wall, with my back to my daughter, implementing my recent strategy of ignoring her until she was dead asleep. Given the slightest bit of attention, even in the middle of the night, my daughter would have trouble finding sleep again. But fortunately, she settled in under the comforter and was quiet. I closed my eyes, hoping I could also go back to sleep quickly. About half a minute passed, then tap, tap, tap. Cold, tiny fingers poked my shoulder. Huh? I groaned, eyes still closed. Couldn't give her too much. She brought her arm back down quickly, but didn't say anything. My wife stirred on the other side of the bed. I tried to fall asleep again. I was just dozing off when I heard a thin and raspy voice mutter, "Daddy?" "Huh?" I grunted, coming to in a start, but still half asleep. Her voice sounded a bit off, the way some sounds do when you are teetering on the edge of a dream, not sure which side of sleep it came from. I lay still, continuing my strategy. She said nothing else, and I was finally able to fall back to sleep. It was still dark outside when she kicked me with her little foot right in the back. I jolted awake and nudged her legs away, straightening her out. I reached over and tapped my phone on the bedside table to check the time. Through blurry eyes, I could see it was still a couple hours until morning. Deciding that I needed to get some good rest before another long day of yard work, I stood, then reached down and scooped up my daughter to take her back to her room. I managed to find my way down the hall to her room in the dark, trying to keep my eyes mostly closed so as not to wake up too much. Nudging open her moaning door with my shoulder, I saw moonlight shining through the bedroom window, illuminating my daughter's bed. Laying there, snuggled up under her covers with her doll, was my little girl, fast asleep. I froze, confused with what I was seeing. I blinked hard to clear away the haze of sleep. I slowly dipped my head to see who I was holding, and as the blurriness cleared, I saw another small girl, about my daughter's age, staring up at me with yellow eyes from sunken sockets. Cool moonlight illuminated horrible gray skin and thin tendrils of black hair. She looked frozen at first, then her lips parted slowly in a grin, revealing dirty brownish teeth. She wore a filthy nightgown with ruffles around the collar, and I became vividly aware of the scrawny, bony body beneath it. The dead girl giggled with her raspy voice, and I dropped her, letting out a shriek of terror. She hit the floorboards with a thud, then hopped to her feet and scurried out the door into the darkness, giggling as she went. I listened to her tiny footsteps fade away down the hall. "Daddy?" I inhaled sharply as I turned to look over at my daughter's bed, realizing I hadn't been breathing. She was propped up on one arm, wiping the sleep out of her eyes with the other hand. "Hey," I said, barely able to squeak it out. I stepped over and scooped her up, then walked over to her doorway. I stood there for a moment, listening, building the courage to step out into the hall. My room was only about 10 steps away, but it felt like a mile. Finally, fairly certain the hall was empty, I took the first step. The second one came easier, and soon I was in an all-out sprint, sure the dead girl was right behind me. I made it to our bed and placed my daughter down in the middle next to my wife, where she fell fast asleep. I lay still next to her until the sun came up, wide awake, eyes fixed on the dark hallway, listening for footsteps. No one knows who Needlejack is or where he comes from, but every time someone goes to our local clinic to get their blood drawn, he's there. He's always humming his strange tune and asking people how they feel about syringes. "How many times have you drawn this year?" he asked one patient. "Want to pull more blood?" he questioned another. It's so odd. The nurses call him Needlejack because that's all he seems to care about. The staff have tried to get rid of him. Many have asked the police to escort him off grounds. But no matter how many times he's arrested, he comes back, as cheerful as ever. At first, I thought this was all a made-up legend, something to scare off people who were afraid to get their blood drawn. But when I went to the clinic to do my own work, I ran into him. As soon as I entered the building, the staff seemed amped up, like they were at the end of their nerves. "I don't think we have any space today," the receptionist said, tapping keys on her computer. I glanced out the window, exhausted, then pivoted back to the clock. My husband Greg was at home watching our newborn Chloe. Today was the only day I can make an appointment. I begged her to let me in. "I'll see what I can do." She recorded my information. "Please have a seat. If there's an opening, a nurse will call you." I transferred my belongings to a chair and waited. I found it frightening that everyone seemed so on edge. The janitor, mopping the floor, kept his eyes on the doors and windows at all times. An older patient next to me peered over her shoulder as if expecting someone to harass her. Now I understand why everyone appeared so disturbed. They were waiting for Needlejack to arrive. And arrive he did. After about 5 minutes, a nurse came out and called my name. "Sarah?" I stood and followed her into the back. I settled into a chair and extended my arm to allow easy access to a vein. As soon as she inserted the point, a loud humming grew from the home. "What is that?" "Oh, that's just Jack. He's a patient at this location. Do your best to ignore him." I darted my eyes away from the noise, but his grating voice filled my ears. "Can you ask him to pipe down?" "Of course." She glanced toward the hall, her voice shaking. "Jack, will you please be quiet? You're disturbing a patient." "Yes, oh yes, I'm sorry." For the next 30 seconds, the only sound came from the nurse as she switched out the vials on my syringe. One click, then another. "All done." She taped gauze onto my arm. "Feel free to sit for a few moments. You might feel dizzy." I glanced at my phone. It was almost 1 o'clock, well past time to get back home and feed Chloe. I stood slowly and progressed toward the hall. When I stepped inside, there he was. A long-legged, skinny man who wore black jeans and a striped shirt. His arms appeared too short for his body, and his hair was trimmed into a bowl cut. "I see you got your blood work done," he said, grinning. "My name is Jack. I just love getting my blood drawn." He waddled up to me and got inches from my face. "Dude!" My mind screamed as I scooted past him. "Back off." "Would you like to see my blood drawn?" "No." "Too bad." He pulled out an unused syringe and jammed it into his vein. Feels so good. I was so mortified that I sprinted to the counter and told the receptionist what had happened. "Yes, I know," she admitted.
That's Jack. He's a regular here. Why does everyone keep saying that? Because he's here almost every day. Do something about it. Throw him out. I'm sorry, I heard his wispy voice behind me. Needle Jack was holding the blood-filled syringe he had just pulled from his vein. Oh, God, I nearly gagged as he licked the vial. Beautiful, he said. So beautiful. On the drive home, I was stunned. Who was he? Why was he there? Why couldn't anyone get rid of him? Once I got home and fed Chloe, I did some digging online. Turns out Needle Jack was a bit of a local legend. Apparently, he'd been terrified of needles as a child. Whenever his mom had brought him to a clinic, he'd scream, "No, mommy, please, oh, let them poke me." But then one day, a mysterious woman came in and whispered something into his ear. He calmed down instantly and allowed the nurses to draw his blood. From that day on, the boy became obsessed with needles, even going so far as to demonstrate how to insert them into his veins for all to see. Even some of the clinic's online reviews mentioned them. Service is fine, but that needle guy is weird. Every time I go in, he's there, talking to people, and it creeps me out. Why won't the staff get rid of him? 2 months later, I found out why. I was on my way home and headed downtown for an errand. Along the route, my front driver's side tire blew out. Shit. I pulled into the nearest repair shop. Coincidentally, it just so happened to be a block away from the clinic. No way, I mused, taking in the scene. I swaddled Chloe and wandered out to the sidewalk, figuring maybe I should drop in. I had 30 minutes to kill. I could ask the nurses a few more questions, but it all seemed so silly. Regardless, I felt compelled to visit the building. When I entered, the front desk was empty. There were no patients in the lobby either. Must be a slow day. Yes, oh yes, oh God. I spun on my heel, my stomach turning. There he is. Why did I come here? I pulled Chloe close and headed for the exit. But before I could reach the door, Needle Jack stepped in, blocking my path. I was hoping you'd return, and even better, you've brought your child. What do you want from me? Your blood. He gestured to my arm. Her blood. It's essential to my survival. My eyes darted to the door at the other end of the lobby. After each test, I take a sample. A little taste here and there. Blood keeps me strong, but a child's is best. He pulled a syringe from his pocket. If I could just draw a little, I promise it won't hurt. Get away from me! I cradled Chloe's head and dashed to the far end of the room, sprinting outside. I nearly reached the crosswalk when I glanced back and saw Jack gaining on us. Please, Sarah, give me her blood! I stopped at the end of the sidewalk. The auto shop was just across the street, but traffic was blazing. Damn. I glanced both ways and dashed into the road, barely missing a semi. A loud honk split my ears as I reached the shop's parking lot, not even blinking. When I made it to the main doors, an agonizing scream caught my ears. I turned and gasped at the sight of Needle Jack, sprawled in the road, his torso twisted like a rotini noodle. A car had struck him head on. Vehicles screeched to a halt on all sides of him. Don't worry, Sarah, he gasped and fell back into a mix of his own entrails. I'll be back. I always come back.
The strangest thing happened after Needle Jack died. Almost instantly, the nurses and patients at the clinic seemed to come to their senses. It was like a long-held curse had been lifted off them. What was it like working there? A news anchor asked one of the staff members. A prison, they responded. Jack made us give him every patient's blood. He'd torture us if we refused. Greg became disgusted with all the media attention. He begged us to move so we could enjoy a fresh start. But how could we do that? Chloe is older now and thriving in preschool. Our friendships with other parents have grown and our careers have blossomed. The only thing that bothers me are Jack's last words. Don't worry, Sarah. I'll be back. I always come back. I wonder if he ever will.
Thanks for watching, and huge thanks again to the authors for sharing their pieces. Let me know in the comments which story was your favorite tonight. Personally, mine was the one about the brother who returned from the Appalachian Mountains. Different. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there.